Jones, number 11, on our Season 3 leaderboard here. Important for him because he might not be able to actually win the race and catch up with Joe Lissette, Alex Bertensini, and friends, but 2 buys when you're in the top 16 for the Invitational.
And let's not forget about the 8 at-large bids at the end of the year as well.
Absolutely, something that Kevin is certainly in play for right now as Game 3 is underway here. Bryant Cook going to play a Hollowed Fountain. Tempo of Enlightenment here for Kevin. His blue-white land is a little bit better than Bryant's.
So it's really interesting coming to the Northeast because we get to see all these players that you may not be familiar with, but just know how to game. Bryant Cook's he's just a tough out.
Yeah.
And, no one in the room really knows who this guy is.
Yeah.
Not huge tournament results, but a tough out.
A divination here for Cook on turn 3. Jones is going to play a Temple of Plenty. Looks like he's going to leave that card on top before passing the turn back. Cook will draw a card. It's a Hollowed Fountain that he puts into play as his 4th land. We'll see if maybe we have a Jace here or if he just wants to leave up 2 blue. Looks like he just wants to leave up 2 blue with the ability to cast a Dissolve.
Yeah.
Jones will play his 4th land. It's Immutable, so both players do have one of those. We'll see who wants to cast a spell first, kind of, a first relevant spell. We'll see both players draw cards and probably let that stuff resolve, as you do see in a Cycle of an Azorius Charm here, but who's going to kind of try to break things open with a Jace, for example?
Well, the first person who's going to be compelled to act is probably the first person who misses land drops. That's typically how these things go. Once you're at risk of discarding the hand size, you kind of just need to cast things. So Bryant Cook with his Divination Azorius Charm, they don't look like significant plays, but if they allow him to just continue to play lands, it matters a lot.
Joe's going to take 2 as well. So now it's 18 all as he plays a Hollowed Fountain untapped. Cook going to take a draw. There's his 6th land. He hasn't missed one yet. You see an island, so he's got a 7th one. He also has a quick and a cycle if he'd like to. Jones going to play a Plains with a white border. Now that's a nice Plains. I believe Portal 3 Kingdoms?
That is a Portal 3 Kingdoms Plains.
I still got it.
You still do got it. Typically my jurisdiction, but you were on the ball with that one.
Yeah. Hollowed Fountain going to come into play tapped. Wonder if that's going to hurt Jones a little bit here. Here's a Revelation.
Now, an interesting dimension of this matchup when you're talking about Bant versus blue-white is access to Mistcutter Hydra. You have to be worried about that when you're on the non-Bant side of the matchup.
It'll be a Syncopate for 2. That'll be a Dispel. We're going to have Counter War here over this Revelation. At least I think we will.
This is an interesting counter battle because it feels like this Revelation is more about, well, Brian has nothing better to do, and Kevin also can't just sit here all day. He needs to kind of counter something. So even though I don't think this Revelation is that significant for either player, it's still worth jockeying over resources a little bit.
I think Brian is in the situation now. If this resolves, that's cool, and if it doesn't, that's cool too.
Exactly.
Because now here's 2 Syncopates. Bryant loses, and I use loses very loosely there, that counter war, but now the shields are down for Kevin Jones, and now Bryant can do exactly this, which is deploy an Elspeth, and now we're playing more of a main phase game as Elspeth's going to come in. That's going to tick up to 5 here, I imagine, in just a moment, as there's no way for that card to go to 3. So in just a moment, I imagine, we'll have some soldier tokens come into play.
And Elspeth is more important in this matchup for Bryant than Elspeth typically is in control mirrors because Kevin has access to Mistcutter Hydra. Even getting 3 tokens in play is a big deal.
This will be 6 mana. Is this an Elspeth here? It's going to be a copy of Planner Cleansing, an expensive way to take care of Elspeth and the soldiers, but it gets the job done nonetheless. So away goes Elspeth. But again, Jones' shields are basically down right now. Yes, there is counter magic that he can cast on 2 mana. We'll see if he has a card like Negate here, for example, on this Jace. And this may have been what Bryant was setting up all along, because now Jace is in play. It's going to tick down to 2. You see a Syncopate, a Verdict, and a Revelation, and it'll be Rev on its own. Very quickly there from Jones, may I add.
It's the big card in the matchup, though Bryant also needs to make sure he's equipped with enough answers to Mistcutter Hydra.
All right. We do draw a card here. Jones does have a Mutavault to attack with if you'd like.
Is definitely an interesting feature of this where, players are going to be going back and forth and fighting over things, countering various spells, trying to resolve stuff, and then someone has access to Mistcutter Hydra, and that can just steal the game no matter what jockeying has really occurred in front of it.
All right, Mutavault. You want to come crashing in? Looks like it does. Jones had the option to fire up 2 Mutavaults that turn, but opting just to go with 1 to go after the Jace. And we'll see if Cook cares about that.
And either way, if you're in Bryant's seat, it shields down no matter what. If you trade Mutavaults or use something like Azorius Charm, you're tapped down pretty low. So if you're worried about Kevin resolving something like Elspeth post-combat, you kind of have to let Jace go there.
You know, cycle Azorius Charm here. Draw a card, will Cook.
Very odd game. And again, Bryant has to be, I know that I've been saying this a lot, really worried about Mistcutter Hydra.
Yeah.
I mean, that warps so much of how he has to sideboard in this matchup, how he has to play these games, how he has to value his Mutavaults. I mean, he can't be that liberal about trading them too, because those are valuable chump blockers in certain spots as well.
You saw Tempo to see it after the Divination. Top card's going to go to the bottom. I imagine that's part of the reason that we saw Supreme Verdict, for example.
Yeah, maybe you would leave in, you know, it's one of those spots where maybe you leave in 1 post board as insurance policy. Maybe there could be upwards of 2 or 3 in Brian's list to protect himself from Mistcutter Hydra.
Maybe that's why we're in Game 3 as well. Maybe Mistcutter Hydra got the job done very quickly. As here's an Elixir of Immortality. We'll see how much Cook cares about this. Certainly a good test spell. Decisions. And it looks like that's going to be good to go. Here is a Quicken from Cook. One of the things that I like about these new blue-white builds is just the ability to get through your deck really fast.
Yeah. And this is another dimension of Mistcutter Hydra in the matchup. Kevin can still win a conventional control game. And so Bryant has to really worry about Elixir on Kevin's side of the table. But the opposite is not true. Kevin doesn't necessarily have to fight over Bryant's Elixirs because Mistcutter Hydra can win the game for him.
It's true. Temple of Plenty, and you can see the Mistcutter Hydra right now in Kevin's hand. He's going to leave the top card on top. Cook going to tap some mana here. He's going to cast just a Revelation for 2. And I imagine if you're Kevin Jones, you're saying, that's fine.
Yeah.
What Brian's doing by doing that Revelation for 2 there, by the way, is he is making a very loud declaration that I have dissolved in my hand. That's all that is to me.
Yep. It's also interesting when both players have Elixir, you care much less about just, you know, Brian has the luxury of, say, firing off a Revelation for 2. When you don't have Elixir, you need to really hold on to those Revelations. It's a finite resource.
Yeah, got to make them count.
But with Elixir in the list, you can just cast them when the moment is right.
See Cook right now has 8 cards in his hand. A couple copies of Dissolve. There's a Negate over there. I believe a Planner Cleansing hiding out as well. Cleansing not very good in this particular spot. Also has a copy of Aetherling as well. So Cook is going to discard that Planner Cleansing. Jones will draw a card for the turn. He will play an island. I gotta say, those white borderlands actually look pretty good.
Yeah, I like a P3K just fine.
I never say that, but those are pretty good. There's a Temple of Enlightenment. Leave that card on top.
And Kevin definitely has an overall game plan of how he wants to address this matchup too, because he's been sitting on this Mistcutter Hydra the whole game.
6 mana. It's time to go to war. This is Aetherling. 1 in the main deck for Brian. He also has 1 in the sideboard too. And this is what you battle over. Again, Flock didn't play this at the Pro Tour. He was able to get the job done without that, using Jace as his win condition along with a couple copies of Mutavault. But not everyone is a Pro Tour champion. Sometimes you do need the help. And that's what Aetherling is going to look to try to provide here, as there is a Syncopate. And Cook says, all right, I'm going to negate that. So there that goes. Here's 3 mana. This is a Dissolve. Let's see if we're going to fight over this, because Cook does have Dissolve in his hand, and he lets it go. But as you mentioned, there is Elixir in his deck.
Yeah, no reason to tap out to protect the Aetherling there, because then Detention Spheres or Supreme Verdict or some piece of nonsense out of Kevin's list just get you.
Here's 3. This is going to be 4 mana. Wouldn't be surprised to see this be the Jace. Yeah, we'll see if we have a fight over this.
It wouldn't surprise me if Kevin doesn't want to deploy that Mistcutter Hydra as long as there is a Mutavault up to block.
Yep.
Because there's no way he wants to just trade it for a Mutavault and a Supreme Verdict or something on the way back.
Solve's card's going to stay on top. Here's 4 mana. This is a Kiora. All right, another Planeswalker here. That elevator's going up to 3. before passing the turn back over to Cook. And now Cook is going to go with an Aetherling. Of course, Kiora ticking up. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by target permanent in opponent control. So you can target Immutable. Get the job done there.
Although, keep in mind, targeting the Immutable turns it into a very good blocker for Miscutter Hydra on the way back.
Correct.
So I don't think Kevin's going to want to do that exclusively this game.
There are some ups and downs to it.
Yeah.
That much is for sure.
I've definitely seen that clause haunt some people. That's come up.
Cook very smartly playing another Aetherling. I imagine that he had another one in his hand when he started the first war. Let that first one go, and now he's able to resolve another one with plenty of blue mana to protect it. So that thing's not going anywhere unless there's severe mismanagement of the shapeshifter. And now it's on Kevin Jones to get the job done, because now the big plan with Mistcutter Hydra gets blown up a little bit once you're underneath some pressure.
Yeah. And now Kevin might just have to act regardless of whether the setup is ideal for him at this point.
See, Jones has the Detention Sphere in his hand. He's going to minus the Kiora. This is 3 mana. Let's make it 4. That's a Jace. See if Cook has any interest in fighting over the Architect of Thought. Does have another Dissolve in his hand. You can also see a Planner Cleansing over there. How much does he care about something like this when he has an Aetherling in play? That's the big question. Plenty of lands to manage it with, too.
Yeah. I would be surprised to see Bryant put up much of a fight over anything that isn't a large revelation or an answer to Aetherling or something like an Aetherling of Kevin's own. But he is going to fight this fight. And a lot of this may just be an issue of mana efficiency, too.
Yeah.
He wants to leave a lot of mana to protect Aetherling. So if he feels like he doesn't need the mana this turn, he gets to trade the Dissolve with something, that might be a good use of resources.
Let's tick down a Jace. That's pretty good tick down, honestly. Dissolve, a Rev, and a Syncopate. See how Bryant wants to split these up. Looks like it's going to be Rev versus from what we can tell here.
Yep, can't give Kevin a Rev and a counterspell here, so
no,
that's that.
See Kevin's hand right now with Mistcutter Hydra and Detention Sphere. Let's see what he's going to add to it. He's going to go with the counterspells. You like that over the Rev?
Well, he already has an enormous mana sink set up in Mistcutter Hydra, and yeah, I just don't think Revelation really even helps him that much at this spot. It plays into further counterspells of Bryant's. It's his entire turn, most likely. So he's got some time, you know? He can overpower this Aetherling. It's not like game over like you often see it. Between Mistcutter Hydra, he has 2 different planeswalkers, some resources to work with. He doesn't need Revelation to power himself back into this game.
Could going to play an island for the turn.
And if Kevin is out of counterspells, that Revelation isn't even worth very much.
Yeah.
You know, it trades with a negate or something.
A Jace for Cook after taking care of Jones's Jace. And he knows there's counter magic that he's running this into. And he might be okay saying, oh, sure, you can dissolve this. I don't really care about that. That's not what's important right now. Might be what he's saying. But it's actually going to resolve. So now down we go. You see a Syncopate and then 2 islands. It'll be lands versus counterspell. Syncopate's going to go to the grip. Lands will go to the bottom here. Cook already did play his land for the turn. And Cook just passed the turn back over to Jones. It's a Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top card. Very quick scry there for Kevin. Looks like that one's staying on top. Just trying to figure out exactly what Jones is looking for in this situation. You know, his plan of sit, do nothing, sit, do nothing, sit, do nothing, huge Mistcutter Hydra, that's kind of out the window now.
I don't think the door is necessarily shut on that line. The problem is that he doesn't want to do it at the minimum while Bryant has access to Immutable to chump block with, because he has to assume Planetary Cleansing, Supreme Verdict, something's happening to his Mistcutter Hydra after the fact.
It looks like a little bit has been called into question on where the scry is going, if he's resolved the scry. He's made no motions or done anything outside of moving his lands around. You saw him scry, and it felt like it was a quick scry to the top, but it didn't look like that he decided what he wanted to do with the card yet either. You know, we don't have a verbal communication if he said top and then is opting to put it to the bottom now after thinking his decision through. But it didn't look like there was any clear indicator, to me at least here in the booth, that said he wanted to keep that card on top. So.
Yeah. I mean, there would had to have been, I feel like there had to have been something verbal expressed to make this an issue.
So it looks like a judge is being called over here, and we'll find out exactly what does happen in the situation. But you still think that Mistcutter Hydra is okay?
Well, I think that it's still something that Kevin can eventually plan towards, but he needs to squeeze more out of it than just a Mutavault chump block and a sweeper.
Sure.
He's got to try to engineer the game in such a way that Bryant is caught with his guard down and Mistcutter Hydra can potentially steal it.
Let me take a look at the sideboard here as far as what Cook has to handle Mistcutter Hydra outside of the combination of block with the Mutavault and then sweep things away. He does have 2 copies of Celestial Flare in his sideboard. Did catch one of those in his hand a little bit ago, so he's got 2 of those. We know about the second Aether only because it's on the table. The first one got countered. He has an Elspeth, 3 Nyx Fleece Rams, 2 Blind Obedience, 2 Celestial Flare that I mentioned, 2 Negate, 2 Dispel, a Last Breath, and a Deicide.
Yeah.
So pretty run-of-the-mill options, honestly.
Yeah, Celestial Flare, and if he wants to go extremely deep, Blind Obedience.
On the other side of things?
Kevin Jones, 4 Nyx Fleece Ram, 2 Archangel Thune, 2 Mistcutter Hydra, 3 Negate, 3 Planar Cleansing, 1 Jace's Ingenuity. So most likely Jace's Ingenuity came in, the Negates, the 2 copies of Mistcutter Hydra, and maybe some of the Planar Cleansings, maybe not. And Archangel, I mean, we see players do sideboard into a more proactive build often in these kind of matchups.
Joe does it all the time.
Yeah.
That's the person I think of as soon as you said that. He always brings in the creatures. Now, normally they're supplemented with Nightfield Specters, but he oftentimes boards those in because players do board out a lot of their removal. And I imagine that's been very successful for him since he is leading Season 3. After all, he's been playing blue-white control decks all throughout Standard. One card I actually do want to touch on here that's in the sideboard of Jones' deck is Jace's Ingenuity. I know that Jacob Wilson played a few copies of that in his sideboard at the Pro Tour. Don't see a lot of talk about that because of Revelation. We have seen some players play one opportunity before, but you see Ingenuity here to help kind of in the control matchups and against Mono Black.
Yeah, I think it's Mono Black where it's the biggest thing because you're trying to slog through these duresses and these thought seizes. They're going to be targeting your Sphinx's Revelation and trying to make you play an honest game. So Jesus' Ingenuity, Opportunity, no, they're not Sphinx's Revelation, but when you have that, when you have Divination, you can power through the discard spells. And all you need to do is be able to get to the game to this state where you top deck Revelation and then the game's over.
Yeah.
And to that end, the more Detention Spheres and removal spells you find, the more time you have to set up this game state. So it almost doesn't matter what you're drawing off of these cards. Mono Black Devotion is trying to turn the game into I'm exchanging resources with you 1 for 1, and then Underworld Connections or Erebos or just Mutavaults and other clocks sweep up the game. And having supplemental card drawers like Jace's Ingenuity, like Opportunity, alongside Sphinx's Revelation makes that game plan much harder to execute.
We're going to head back to our game here. We'll see what our official ruling is as soon as we do know you guys. And it looks like the ruling is the card that went to the bottom, which isn't much of a surprise to me. It just didn't seem like he did anything concrete, in that situation to say that I'm keeping this card on the top. Doesn't hurt to call a judge, of course. And now the situation is resolved. But hey, that's what judges are there for.
For sure.
So again, Jones has played his land for the turn. It's a copy of Temple of Enlightenment. The scry has already been resolved and all that good stuff. And now it's a copy of Mistcutter Hydra. And this is what you talked about. So the Hydra's going to come into play. Of course, it cannot be countered. It's going to be a 7/7. It's going to rumble on into the red zone. Now here is Celestial Flare, a card I had a feeling Cook did bring in, and there is one of the 2, at least from his sideboard.
This is so rough if you're Kevin too. This was your big finish, and it's been dismissed this easily.
Yeah, a flare, and then you lose the counter warrior. Just off gets countered by Syncopate. There goes your Mistcutter Hydra. That's to the bin. And you're tapped out. So you're either going to lose your Kiora or a whole bunch of your life this turn.
Or both. Bryant has a Mutavault.
That's true. Going to cash in the Jace to start things off. So top 3 cards here is another copy Mutavault, Divination, and a Temple of Enlightenment. Divination, of course, going to go by itself. And it looks like that's what Bryant's going to take, and he will. So to the bottom go the cards. See if he wants to move forward by casting Divination. And he will. So now 2 cards coming here for Cook. Again, has not played a land just yet. Did draw a Mutavault for the turn. He's going to play Temple of Enlightenment first, though. Take a look at the top card. That one looks as though it's going to stay on top for Bryant.
Now, keep in mind, Kevin has no Aetherling of his own here. no Pithy Needle in his list, no Phyrexian Revoker. I mean, this is unchecked.
Mutavault's going to take care of that. Aetheling's going to come after the life total. Yeah, Jones is at 23, but Aetheling can knock that down pretty quickly. See how much pump Cook wants to put in this, assuming there will be any at all. You see him reaching a little bit here. You want to try to sometimes get in increments of 8 if you can.
The biggest thing is just keeping all the mana that he needs available. That's priority 1. I think he's going to err on the side of being maybe more conservative than he needs to be to make sure he's never put in a position where Aetheling's at any sort of risk.
Yeah. So you saw Jones take 5. He goes down to 18. Now it's time to tap some mana. There's another Kiora hanging out over there, so there is the crashing wave. We'll see if Cook cares about this. He does have a Dissolve in his hand that he's been holding for some time. Shrugged his shoulders, says that's just fine with me. Going to use the Explore effect there from Kiora. You see in Jones' hand right now, he's got a D-Sphere. There's a couple counter spells over there as well, but those counter spells and those D-Spheres, they don't take care of the problem. But that's Aetheling that's on the table. There's another Kiora.
Well, if Bryant didn't fight over the first one, I don't think he's fighting over the second one.
Second one's good. So there's the minus again for the Explore effect. And now I imagine we're going to see a Jace.
I mean, this tap out is pretty rough because I think both these Planeswalkers now just get swept up here by
the Mutavaults, right?
Yep.
Yep. Because, I mean, if you're taking Jace up, what do I care?
Right. And Bryant can still untap and just kill it also.
We're going to take down Jace here. There's an Elspeth, the Syncopate, and a Dissolve. Counter spells are pretty good when Aetheling is in play, but it is. So there go the counter spells. The Elspeth going to go to the bottom.
And I think that Bryant might be working on the assumption that Kevin just cannot beat an Aetherling. And he says, take all the counter spells you want.
Yeah, I have my thing that you want to counter in play. And I have Mutavaults as well, which are, of course, uncounterable. Those can take care of the Planeswalkers. You see Cook play another Mutavault. And now he's going to start to organize the mana here. This is, of course, Aetheling management on what he wants to do with this card.
There's also the question, I imagine the Mutavault's finishing off Jace almost no matter what, if Bryant even cares about the Kiora at all and just wants to get in a hit.
Yeah. I think of the two Planeswalkers, the Jace is the more important of the two.
Yeah. Because Revelation is still a card Bryant has to keep in mind here.
Absolutely. And he will take a minute just to figure out how he wants to tap all the mana, exactly what he wants to accomplish on this turn. It's going to be a good one no matter what, as Jones's shields are down. And Cook can decide if he wants to take out both Planeswalkers, one or none, and just get some damage across. Now, I don't really expect Bryant to be able to win future counter wars, but he doesn't need to.
No.
That's the big thing. At least at this point with how this game has been going. So here come your attacks. And it looks like in just a moment we're going to see some pumps. Cook just deciding exactly what mana he wants to dump into the Aetherling, and he wants to use planes instead of islands for obvious reasons. So there's a whole bunch of pumps, 4 of them. Yep, now he's going to blink this out. Looks like he's going to cast Planar Cleansing. Interesting.
Okay.
He's already played a land for the turn. Of course, Planar Cleansing is not going to kill Mutavault. It kills all non-land permanents. Another thing comes back with just 1 blue mana available to protect itself. Now, this probably doesn't work out poorly for Cook.
It's hard to imagine Kevin has 2 instant speed ways to fight over an Aetherling in his band deck.
The other thing that's pretty telling
I guess he only needs 2 answers, one of which is an instant speed.
Correct. The other thing that's really telling here, as you see Jones is going to operate with some mana here, is that Cook is basically saying, by making the play that he did, is, he's basically saying, 1, I don't think I'm going to be able to win any counter wars, but 2, what's the worst thing that you can do?
It's Revelation or bust, basically. And then even at that stage, it's you say, okay, well, we do this again next turn.
Yeah. So Jones goes down to 8. Part of the reason you also saw that attack last turn is because by putting him to 8, Aetherling could just be lethal on this turn. Jace did tick up, so it won't be a lethal attack. But Cook is certainly still in the driver's seat here. We know that. A Plains is his land for the turn. Again, among all of those lands, there are 2 copies of Mutavault. In comes Aetherling. There will be a Jace trigger. Cook shrugs his shoulders, says, that's cool. Mutavault's going to try to block. Now Aetherling's going to be unblockable, so Mutavault's going to go back hiding into the row. We'll see how much the attack is going to be for. Right now it's for 3, and it can get as high as 7. Looks like Cook is going to make it 5. So Jones is going to go down to 3.
Imagine just passing it back and putting Kevin to the same test.
Yeah. Going to take down Jace. Take a look at a couple of cards here. It's a negate, it's a rev, and it's an elixir.
Well, that complicates matters here a little bit. But elixir only puts Kevin to 8, which means the 8th link attack is still lethal, which is likely why Bryant pushed him to 3 in the first place.
Cook on tap here. The other thing too is that it's not going to be a very big rev, I don't think. It can't be as big as Jones would like it to be, simply because he needs to defend his rev.
Yeah.
Defending it takes mana for counter magic. And for example, right now, Cook is just saying, okay, this is lethal.
Yeah, he can totally controls the terms of engagement here.
I don't have to pump at all.
So Kevin needs to rev for at least 6 to make sure that he can beat the 8th link on board.
There's a rev for exactly 6. That's a dispel. That's an efficient counterspell. This is a dissolve. That's a dissolve, and that is going to do it. Bryant Cook is going to win this match over Kevin Jones. Blue-white control, very close to what Yvonne Flock did win the Pro Tour with. Gets the job done over Bant control. Cook opting for win conditions this go around, but again, not everyone can play as quickly and as efficiently as Yvonne Flock can.
No, very few can. Although, again,